I'm looking around me at the world and I'm wondering, is your prayer one for peace during these violent times? Does it seem to you that violence is increasing at a dramatic pace? There seem to be so many massacres, shootings, killings that they blur into each other, and you hear about another one and you feel numb and helpless. Almost like violence is spreading like an unchecked virus. Do you find yourself being sucked in by the gory images in the news, just sitting watching as those images play? Everyone I know wants more peace. Yet when I ask friends for solutions, things like prayer and love come up often. But let's face it, prayers to end violence just don't seem to be working. And what is the how-to of love? I think love holds promise, but is it enough? So I'm reminded of a story of a young novice who accompanied a wise man who had mastered love into the forest at full moon on a summer's evening. As the novice sits down to pray, his body turns ice cold when he sees a 7-foot dragon-like creature with fierce eyes lunging towards him. At that moment, white light shot out and hit the creature in the heart, causing it to flee. The novice realizes that it's the manifested energy of the wise man's love that has repelled the creature. Over the next few months, this incident repeats many times. One night when the dragon appeared, the novice was surprised to feel his arms and heart opening. His fear and terror were gone. The creature turned and left. Turns out, a loving heart had been all the shield the novice needed. Lesson learned. One person changed the violent intent of one creature. Now, many years ago, I read Shirley MacLaine's book, The Camino, A Journey of the Spirit. And in it, she tells the story of walking through a deserted Spanish town overrun by wild dogs. She claims that it was the love she exuded that protected her and allowed her to walk through them unscathed. One person changed the behavior of a group of wild dogs. But I mean, come on, wasn't Shirley MacLaine a bit out there, a bit woo-woo? There are some that might think that. But how about Immaculée Ilibagiza? She was a Catholic Tutsi woman who survived the Rwandan genocide by hiding locked in a tiny bathroom for months while her entire family was slaughtered. She writes about this ordeal in her fabulous book, Left to Tell. Afterwards, though, while helping Tutsi refugees to flee, there was a group of Hutu militants that stopped them. Without fear, she calmly faced those Hutus, diffusing their evil intent with the sheer force of her love. The refugees she was leading were able to cross the border and escape. One person changed the violent hearts of a group of people. Now, just before the imminent release of Nelson Mandela, after 27 years in prison, the talk around South African dinner tables was overpoweringly fear-based. I know, I was living there. For many years, the media had painted Nelson as a violent terrorist. Whiteys feared for their lives. And yet, I remember this happening. Almost overnight, it seemed. Fear disappeared, and in fact, many voted for Madiba, a term of endearment, meaning father, in the next election. Nelson Mandela is quoted as saying, "I had a dream of an Africa which is in peace with itself." He became the peace he dreamed about. One person changed the hearts of an entire nation. Well, these stories all hold promise, but none of us seem to give us the practical to-do instructions. And so I went searching and came across super radiance, which I believe is the key, possibly, to helping us reduce violence. So quantum physicist John Hagelin shares research on the super radiance effect, a term that describes the positive impact that a group of meditators had on violence, crime, and social disorder. This happened in the 1980s in the Middle East, in Lebanon, where experienced meditators were able to reduce war deaths and injuries as well as the incidence of bombings. When statistically looked at, the chances of these changes being a coincidence were less than 1 part in 10,000. So we have to ask ourselves, can we create peace? Well, according to the many teachings of Deepak Chopra, to sort of summarize them, there's an energetic current that runs through and connects and affects every single body and everything. Every thought, every emotion, every intention, and every action vibrates, radiating a signal that attracts a matching signal in response. Doesn't that make you think about the signal that you're putting out? It makes me think about the signal I'm putting out. When you're thinking, you're planning the future. When you're intending, you're seeding the future. When you're feeling gratitude, or conversely, when you're worrying, you're manifesting the future. So there's nothing, including violence, that we haven't collectively created. And while that might sound like bad news, it's good news, because if we've created violence collectively, we can also create peace collectively. In his book, Secrets of the Lost Mode of Prayer, New York Times best-selling author Greg Braden shares an intriguing version of prayer from John 16, verse 24. It says, quote, "Ask without hidden motive," and these are my italics, "be surrounded by your answer." Greg Braden goes on to explain it by telling a story about Native Americans praying rain. Not praying for rain, but rather praying rain. So they don't ask a deity to provide them what isn't there. They merely surround themselves with the answer as if it's already manifested, and they are just calling upon it to make itself known. They smell rain, they feel the droplets on their upturned faces, and they visualize lush flora. And that makes me think, could it be that in the asking for peace via petitionary prayer, such as, "God, please help us to have less violence," we might unwittingly be creating more violence? How do we pray for peace? When we're praying for it, what exactly are we focusing on? What images do we hold in our hearts and our minds as we pray? Are they violent ones, the ones we're bombarded with in the media? What emotions do we hold in our hearts? Is it a smoldering anger towards the perpetrators, or a sense of helplessness as we doubt our prayers will be effective? Is it possible to focus on wanting less of something? Or should we focus on the picture we'd like to see more of? Because believing is conceiving, conceiving is creating. So what is the prayer? Greg Braden, in search of understanding prayer as experienced by Tibetan monks, was told, feeling is the prayer. In other words, it's a kind of wishful thinking, as if our prayers have already been answered. Through this intangible language, we participate in the creation of peace. As Braden describes it, if feeling is the prayer and we're always feeling, then that means we're always in a state of prayer. Each moment is a prayer. Life is a prayer. We're always sending a message to the mirror of creation, signaling healing or disease, peace or war, honoring or dishonoring our relationships with those we love. Life, he says, is the mind of God, sending back to us what we feel, what we have prayed. The description Dr. Hagelin provides may be the key to why super radiance works. He says that positive results were achieved by meditators radiating this experience of inner peace to become outer. A participant in one of these peace efforts puts it this way: we don't pray for certain things to happen for a leader or a country. We simply emanate and celebrate peace. Peace is an awareness, a consciousness, rather than something we do. It's something we become. Scientific research of the superradiance effect found that it takes relatively few people to effect significant change. For example, in a city of 1 million people, the number is only about 100. This number represents only the minimum needed to begin the process. And the more people there are, the faster the process. But why is it that so few people can achieve such a huge impact? Well, in his award-winning work, Power versus Force, Dr. David Hawkins and his team measured the relationship between muscle testing, kinesiology, and various emotions. And then he produced what he calls the map of human consciousness, based on this research. Now, according to his scale, muscles weaken for the emotion of shame at a score of 20, the bottom of the scale, followed by guilt at 30 and fear at 100. The turning point, though, where muscles maintained strength was courage at 200, love calibrated at 500, and peace at 600. But he points out that the map of consciousness is a logarithmic scale, which means that love at 500 isn't only 5 times more powerful than fear at 100, but exponentially more powerful. He explains it this way. Figures do not represent an arithmetic, but a logarithmic progression. Thus, the level of 300 is not twice the amplitude of 150, it's 10 to the 300th power. So an increase of even very few points represents a major advance in power. The rate of increase in power as we move up the scale is enormous. What this means in practical terms is that only a very few people living at the higher emotions of love, joy, and peace can radically affect the lives of many. So we might ask ourselves, what's our role? Immaculee's powerful love towards those Hutu militants stopped potential evil in its tracks. When Madiba became peace, the hearts of a nation grew to love him. And us? What can we do to play our part, even in the face of proliferation of never-ending sensationalized media coverage? How can we manifest what we do want rather than what we don't? Well, here are some ways of doing it. Limit the amount of TV coverage you're exposed to. Just watch less TV. Avoid encouragement of writing or forwarding emails or using any social media that puts more attention on the story, and avoid talking about it unnecessarily. How about concentrating on having compassion for the victims rather than focusing on images of violence and the anger that it generates? And really importantly, remember that we can be most helpful by becoming the prayer of peace we wish to see in this world and radiating that outwards. In other words, prayer isn't something we take time out of our life to do. It is our life. Prayer doesn't only happen on our knees. It happens in our intending, our thinking, our talking, the everyday activities of our lives. If we're living, we're praying. When I'm patient, I'm busy creating and spreading that prayer. When I'm impatient, I'm busy creating and spreading that prayer. When I'm forwarding emails that invoke division, distrust, and promote anger and hatred, I'm busy creating and broadcasting that prayer, and so on. There isn't anything we intend, think, or do that isn't part of a prayer. Said another way, our life is one continuous prayer instead of something we either do or don't do. Saying prayer but not living them isn't prayer. That's lip service. We're all busy with prayer every living moment. It's just what your prayer, the life force that you're putting out to the world on a continuous basis, is in that moment that determines what your life prayer will go out and create in this world. Staying in a peaceful state of mind isn't only central to your well-being and health and the quality of your relationships too, but it's also your prayer going out into the world. I'm Carrie Corbet-Owen. Join me in creating more peace in your life and more peace in the world by signing up for my 52 Be at Peace stress-busting tips, which you can do at www.carriecorbetowen.com. Please spread this message. Let's together start a movement.